Welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast. Of course, talking waiver wire pickups entering week 3. Obviously, big news happened on Monday Night Football across both games. Obviously, the one is drawing plenty of attention, but both to address. We'll talk about some receivers, too. Maybe somebody in Detroit that might have some interesting fantasy upside as well. We're going to get to all that and more. I want to hit the music first, though. Again, welcome everyone to the Tuesday edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast. I'm Joe Bartel. You can follow me at JB Fantasy Sports on Twitter. You can follow Jake at RotoJake if you're watching live. Kudos. I imagine, Jake, this is going to be one of our most listened podcasts of the season. I think this is going to be one of the most viewed podcasts if you're watching it live as well because of the news that happened on Monday Night Football, the grossness that happened with it and everything else. I promise we're going to get to that. We're going to do something we've never done before since we've been doing the podcast and the Waiver Wire show specifically over the past 4 years. But we should talk a little bit about the games themselves. They're a bit of a stinker. You have it on the outline. I agree. A bit of a backdoor cover. I've been writing these. I've been doing the spreads over-unders for every single game. It's been pissing me off every single time we get these over-unders. But you had the Saints win, and you had the Steelers get carried by the defense once more. Kenny Pickett gets his first victory of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first and foremost, if you're just tuning in here off the bat at the top of the hour, there are game-changing waiver wire pickups this week. There are guys that you will be dumping 80% or greater of your FAAB budget on. There are guys that you will be using your top waiver wire claim overall on here. So definitely stay tuned, and we're going to go a little out of order to honor those positions. But yeah, you're right. I got a chance to watch pretty much most of these Monday night games. It wasn't the Saints' offensive explosion that I expected. Carolina actually played okay, and the score is a lot closer than this game actually was. The Carolina offense couldn't really move the ball until kind of the end there, right, when they had the Thielen double dip to get within 3 points. And yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say about that from a fantasy perspective, but kind of getting into our waiver wire implications, you have Jamal Williams leaving the game there with a hamstring injury. So that's a potential. I mean, he hasn't exactly been playing great. Hasn't exactly been killing it this season, but so what happens in his stead here, right? Taysom Hill had 9 carries for 75 yards, and they recently added Tony Jones Jr. off the practice squad. He came through with 2 touchdowns, much to the dismay of Olave and Michael Thomas, managers here. So Kamara's still out another week, right? So that kind of muddies things a little bit, and we don't really quite know the status of Kendre Miller, but there are absolutely some waiver wire implications here we're going to get to in this game.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, you look at the running backs that were injured. Jamal Williams probably isn't of name brand value. Saquon Barkley will factor in. We'll talk about Matt Breida and the Giants in a little while too. And obviously Nick Chubb and his gruesome injury. There's some big names. And we're not even factoring Austin Eckler and J.K. Dobbins from week 1 too. Kenny Gainwell was a top waiver wire pickup for us last week. Well, he didn't end up playing Thursday. There's a lot of running back injuries. I acknowledge that. I think you and I are both really aware of it. We are doing the show on Tuesday. We are working with the information that we have at this time. So right now, the Browns' starting running back is Jerome Ford, for example. Right now, we don't know if Kendre Miller is playing for the Saints or if Jamal Williams is. So Tony Jones, who played last night, would be the guy. There is Kareem Hunt. There is Leonard Fournette on free agency. Cam Akers has been rumored to be traded to a number of different teams. He fell out of favor again with Sean McVay and the Rams. There's a lot of different possibilities. We are going to do our best to tackle all of them. I'm going to talk about how I'm grappling with it in high stakes leagues and even the friends and family leagues too. There is not a league that will not be impacted. Any kind of format that will be impacted that won't be impacted. This is going to be one of those where everyone listening can find a situation or reason to roster at least one of these guys.
Making the right call this week is going to decide whether your team makes the playoffs or not in a lot of leagues.
Yeah,
there's no question about it.
I'm right there with you. So I guess just jumping right back to the Monday Night Football game real quick before we discuss the injuries that occurred for those, I just don't think Kenny Pickett's it. I mean, I think – so I posed this question to some friends, and I'm curious, Jake. If you have a team and the offensive coordinator is Matt Canada, defensive coordinator is Joe Barry, special teams coordinator, you can get a Joe Judge in there, and then the GM is Bill O'Brien, how many – offensive touchdowns a week does that team score? Because I think it's like over under 1. That Matt Canada is the Joe Barry equivalent to offensive coordinators. That guy is awful. But I think Kenny Pickett's also bad. And if it weren't for a 73-yard slant play the Steelers would have lost to a Deshaun
Exactly.
Watson dysfunctional Browns offense. I mean, that's saying something.
And that 73-yard slant play did help me win one of my
Well, good for
fantasy
you, Jake.
matchups here. So, we got that. So, I mean, there was a lot of, we talked last week about Allen Robinson, Calvin Austin, right? Ended up being pretty much non-factors. 3 and 4 targets, respectively, 12 and 10 receiving yards, respectively. It really is all Pickens. And then also, surprisingly, all Jaylen Warren, right? Because Najee Harris, I don't know if I'm ready. You can't sell Najee Harris right now, but he is very, very difficult to be trotting out there week after week. Now, granted, they started with some of the 2 better defenses in the league. I think this Cleveland Browns defense is excellent, and I think it was odd because after the Chubb injury here, which is the main focus of this podcast, the Browns go from minus 230 to minus 145 to make the playoffs. So they're still technically considered they're going to make the playoffs despite what looks to me like still pretty shaky quarterback play from Deshaun Watson. It's not quite he doesn't quite have it yet, and I'm not sure that he will, but they're definitely in it. They have the defense and they have enough pieces that they could go out and try to pick up a running back here, potentially to make a playoff run here. But if they don't, there's one clear-cut top pickup for the week.
Yeah, Brooks Durham had mentioned, do you sell high in Swift? What are some trade targets at running back for him? I'm not sure it's a Swift question. We could answer that a little bit later in the show. I would be trying to trade for Jaylen Warren because I think there's a point now with the Steelers, especially if they start to lose a few more games. You can't blame Kenny Pickett, right? The organization takes an overall L. Maybe you say, hey, this Najee Harris guy really isn't doing it. Let's get Jaylen Warren more involved. I was not confident he was a quality backup in the same way that Alexander Madison was to Delvin Cook in past years. Watching Monday night's game, he's explosive, and he runs tough. Like, he runs what I feel like a Steeler running back should run like. So I would be trying to see if I could get Jaylen Warren for a flex wide receiver or even my running back too, because I think there's a point later in the season where he might be the starting back for the Steelers, and that doesn't even require Najee Harris to get injured, although we know he does often too. So just something to keep in mind. Let's talk about Jerome Ford and the Browns running back situation.
Yeah, I also should real quick say before we move on to that, Jaylen Warren's actually only rostered in 41% of Yahoo leagues right now. He could have probably made our list as well. So I wanted to, I just thought I'd double check on that just to see what the availability was like. But he's up there, maybe not quite in a Kyren Williams situation, but might be not too far away from it.
Okay, and that's good information. So I want to preface before we talk about Jerome Ford that you and I, but mainly me, you could quote whatever play you want from that. If you listen to musicals like I do, there's a line for that. You and I, but mainly me, got Puka Nakua's got his FAAB number wrong. I was saying around 28 to 32% last week. That's the highest I would go to. Well, I watched in your stake league, and I watched in my stake league. Puka Nacua went for $80 out of a $100 budget and $66 in a different one. In the
I
NFC,
think our leagues
he went for $350 out of $1,000.
Yeah. I think stake league and those types of leagues are slight anomalies because they're 14 teams and people want to get their guy first because the hype wasn't too crazy in some of my more, like, I have some leagues that aren't industry leagues, but guys that I still consider pretty sharp. And I wasn't ready to commit and go all in. I think I had a $12 keep him honest bid out on Puka. He only went for like 27 in those leagues. So some of these, sometimes, we kind of have to keep in mind that the average listener in some of these industry leagues operate a little bit differently. And where if you want to get your guy, you go and get him. Exactly. So I think we weren't that far off. Now, obviously, if he's still out there, which he is in maybe, 25, 30% of leagues, it's still possible because he's a roster and a 10-teamer now, right?
Yeah. Well, but I was prefacing this by saying you need to know what your league is like and what your needs on your roster are. And I'm sure we're going to have questions throughout the show. Hey, I got X, Y, and Z running backs right now that are still alive. What do I do with Jerome Ford? But we might give a number that's lower than what actually makes sense for your roster. I have heard already here at the office, hey, I'm going to go 80% of my FAAB budget on Jerome Ford. I have to, right? And I think that's reasonable.
If you're a Nick Chubb owner, then yes, absolutely. You definitely have to. I was asking, I got asked a question this morning from a close friend, like, okay, Chubb's out. How much do I have to bid in a $200 budget? I was like, my first call was 40 to 60%, but it's like, wait a minute, if you have Chubb, it's got to be higher. Yeah. So again, you got to kind of test the waters and smell out the league, but this will be an 80% bid probably.
So we're doing this on a Tuesday. It's entirely possible, especially as the Browns kind of try to figure out what to do post Nick Chubb injury, that they re-sign Kareem Hunt. Obviously, he has experience with the Cleveland offense. He was with Kevin Stefanski last year. This shouldn't be a surprise for Kareem Hunt to rejoin Cleveland. However, my argument has been, and it still continues to be, the concern about what happens if Nick Chubb gets injured has been there since week 1 of the preseason. I mean, and the Browns really didn't seem too eager to change that. They could have signed Kareem Hunt at any point. In fact, they would have probably gone for cheaper if they chose to re-sign him in week 2 or 3. Jerome Ford left week 2 of the preseason with a hamstring injury. They traded for Pierre Strong for the Patriots. That was it. I foolishly cut Jerome Ford pre-week 1 in the Beat Joe Bartel Online Championship. Didn't get him back in week 2. Definitely pissed about that now. But I'm just saying, like, the Browns have had opportunities to bring back Kareem Hunt, and it would have made sense. Just because Nick Chubb is out, I don't think it's that obvious of a one-for-one. I really don't.
Yeah, no, you nailed it right in the head there. If they really wanted to bring him back, it would have happened already.
Or if they were concerned about this scenario,
exactly,
they would have already done it. Now, Kareem Hunt is going to be more expensive, at least in his estimation. And then there's the fact that I don't even think it's the Kareem Hunt of the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, this isn't the same player that he had been, where he was a flex play darling, especially PPR leagues, certainly with the Chiefs, but past years with the Browns too. I think this guy has lost a step from a running perspective. And this offense with Deshaun Watson is not involving the check down passes nearly as much as it did with Baker Mayfield. Like, I just kind of wonder, everyone just assumes Hunt's going to return back to Cleveland. He might, but I don't think it's inobvious that he's even the starter.
Yes, I know. I 100% agree. And I if I knew, let's say middle of this show, Kareem Hunt gets signed, right?
Could happen.
What happens? How much lower than 80% do we go for Ford? And I think you're right. I think it's not that much, because I still think Ford did not look bad. He had one very nice explosive 69-yard run. That's definitely what you want to see, especially against a tough defense like this. Finished with 16 carries for 106 yards, and then couldn't quite finish and score on the 69-yard run, and then Pierre Strong came in and got the touchdown there. But, after Nick Chubb left the game, 2 carries for Strong, 16 for Ford. It's a pretty clear distribution here, and we already saw him pass the eye test here. A 5th-round pick.
Well, I'll give you something real quick, because it wasn't just that 69-yard run, which was kind of fluky, right? He runs to the left, kind of bounces to the left, runs to the right, gets a bounce to the left, and then is gone. That shows his speed. That's great. We knew that from college. There was a run, I think it was either the 3rd or 4th quarter, where he gets contact about 5 yards in and pushes forward for another 5 yards. And I'm like, oh, man, he's pretty strong. And then I think you have the stats right now pulled up, Jake. You can tell me if I'm wrong. He had 2 catches for 30 yards or something to that effect. Like, he was a recipient as well, too.
3 out of his 4 targets. Yeah,
4 targets. So I really.
Oh, and he scored a receiving touchdown too. I missed that.
Yeah, I think Jerome Ford is going to be a completely capable guy. However, the Browns probably need another backup, right? If your concern was Nick Chubb goes down, we have Jerome Ford, it'll be okay. Well, the same issue presents, especially knowing Ford had the hamstring injury in preseason. I don't know if it's Pierre Strong. I know he got the touchdown. I think that was more that they had no other bodies at running back. Dearness Johnson's with Jacksonville.
Ford exhausted from a 69-yard run. Let's get Strong to finish.
Let's go ahead and put Pierre Strong in there.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah, so I'm pretty convinced the Browns are going to get a guy. I don't think it's Kareem Hunt, and I don't think it's Cam Akers, who is a very popular name right now after Kylen Williams. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. A waiver wire pickup that we called correctly. Got the 2 touchdowns for the Rams. Ends up looking at the star running back. We've done this song and dance with Cam Akers now for a full year of, Sean McVay actually hates him. Doesn't like his family or something. I have no idea. Let's go ahead and trade him. Oh, we can't find a trade partner. Okay, week 9, let's go. Cam Akers, you can run the ball again. I don't know if there's trade interest. There's been reportedly the Ravens, Raiders, and Browns have all reached out to the Rams to see if they could acquire Akers. I'm not buying it. I'm really not buying it, and I don't think that guy is all that good either. I don't know if it's post-injury or he just wasn't all that effective to begin with. But I don't think Akers is the answer.
That's the agent's job, right, to drum up some team interest.
Or the Rams.
Yes, or the Rams, exactly. Yeah, you're right, to create some kind of demand here. So here's the interesting thing with Ford, though, that I want to discuss. Kyren Williams was 63% rostered, right? Zack Moss just missed our threshold at 54%. Gus Edwards missed our threshold quite a bit at 65%. These are a lot of names that I see come up in a lot of waiver wire columns that aren't actually that helpful because they're unattainable in the great majority of leagues, at least the leagues where people are paying attention here. Where does Ford fit into that mix? Like, say you have the top pickup and Kyren Williams is still available. do you take Kyren Williams before Ford?
Oh,
Because
boy.
I think you.
I
It's
would.
very, very, very close. Yes, I do agree that Kyren Williams. I mean, you have an RB1
We are
on a team that
operating.
looks a lot better than what we think here. So I just wanted to stack Jerome Ford up with these other, these guys that are both looking like, they could have big
We're
ones.
operating with knowledge that we have Tuesday, and I think we know Kyron Williams is the guaranteed starter, will be a pass catching threat for the Rams. We know that today, Tuesday, as we're doing the podcast. We can't confirm, even though if you and I both have that intuition, we can't confirm that's the case for Jerome Ford, so I would have Kyron Williams higher. But to your point, when it comes to a FAAB budget, Kyron Williams only available in 37% of Yahoo leagues. Jerome Ford probably widely available in those.
Yep. Yeah, he's only
I
17% rostered, and I
exactly.
guarantee you that number is because of a lot of first come, first serve.
So I will be putting about 40% of my budget in leagues where I'll put 35% of my budget in leagues where I don't need a starting running back. So like I'm
Yep.
operating 35
That's
to
the keep
38.
them honest bid that you definitely want to be putting out there. There's definitely somebody on your roster that is less useful than Jerome Ford right now. So that's your minimum keep them honest bid. If you're an active, smart, engaged fantasy manager, you start there, and then we creep that up.
Start at 35%. Like that's the crazy. I'm starting at 35% for Jerome Ford. I think that's kind of crazy to think about. That's how confident I am that he is going to be the de facto guy with Nick Chubb done for the rest of the season. We've spent a lot of time talking about that Monday Night Football game. I think we do need to spend a little bit with Tony Jones and the Saints as well, because that's a troubling situation. Alvin Kamara will not be back for the Packers game. Oh, by the way, Packers run defense looks as bad as it has been for the past decade. Thanks, Joe Barry. Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, Desmond Ridder all carved them up. I bet you I can take the over on Derek Carr's 5 rushing yards and quadruple that for a win, too. I don't know who's starting for the Saints. Kendrick Miller, third-round pick, has not been healthy really since the preseason. I know he was active, not really playing, doing some snaps. Jamal Williams gets banged up. It's entirely possible Jamal Williams isn't ready to go by Sunday. This is the perils of doing the show on Tuesday. We don't know this information beforehand. I think Tony Jones becomes one of the top pickups for a 1-week scenario, which you probably have to deal with all these running back injuries, that you could play him as a running back 2 or flex.
Yeah. So I mean, a guy like Tony Jones is absolutely playable. I mean, he actually had an equal amount of snaps as Adam Prentice, but that's the fullback, right? So he was really the only one to get running back action. Of course, that doesn't count Taysom Hill, who is not quite RB eligible. I think most leagues have him tight end eligible. I don't even know 100% because I stayed away from him. I don't like that gimmicky stuff that is so volatile there. So yeah, Tony Jones is definitely in the mix, but the thing is he probably ranks a little bit higher than a guy like Matt Breida, but only because of the matchup, right? You're talking short-term guys, because Matt Breida is the next guy I had in the list at San Francisco. Now, granted, Kyren Williams just had a great game against San Francisco, top 3 or 4 running back overall against San Francisco. I don't think that's the norm, but you have similar situations here because it's a guy with very short-term utility, right?
Right, and it's interesting. We didn't even talk about the matchup with Jerome Ford, who's going against the Titans. The Titans held popular waiver wire pickup Joshua Kelly with Eckler out to, I think, only 39 yards and didn't get involved from a passing perspective. I'm picking up Jerome Ford with the assumption he's the starter year-round, and I'm not concerned about him struggling against the Titans. I'm not concerned about Kyron Williams in those situations, too. I would be about Matt Breida. Matt Breida is different. The Giants' offense is different than whatever we were seeing with the Rams last week as well, too. Breida is electric, but I think Gary Brightwell might get a few carries as well, too. The spread is 10.5 points in favor of the Niners, who are playing at Candlestick. Like this,
I also saw some rumors that Paris Campbell might get some running back touches.
Yeah, well, they're going to get him killed then if that's the case.
Yeah, it's a weird situation there. So you just throw it out there because Saquon managers kind of have to do the same thing as Chubb managers, except they can't look within their own team. They have to look elsewhere because there's not an easy solution on the Giants for that. Breida's 2% rostered. You might even let him be able to slip through waivers if you want
in
to
shallower
grab
leagues.
him. Yeah,
I think you have to roster the guy who could get playing time at running back. It's just too shallow of a position, especially with all the top end injuries. You're going to have to, even in 12-team leagues guaranteed, but some 10-team leagues, you might have to do that as well. I sooner think the Giants are a team that could acquire Cam Akers or sign Leonard Fournette or Kareem Hunt than the Browns. I know it sounds ridiculous, but Matt Breida is not the starting running back of a team if Saquon Barkley is out. That's just not what I think he can be over the totality of the season or 3 weeks, right? That's what this normal ankle high sprain is. They did such
they
weird
always go
phrasing
out of their
with
way
that
to
in
say
there.
regular or normal ankle sprain. It's not a high ankle sprain. Because
Don't worry, guys.
fantasy
He's
managers
only
get
out 1
scared.
month
Yeah,
instead,
yeah.
too.
So it's only 3 weeks instead of 6. But it's interesting too because I mean this is the kind of thing that you need to take the time to fully recover from and not get rushed back. And we'll see what the Giants look like in these next couple of weeks here. I was ready to write their whole season off after seeing them down like 3 scores to the freaking Cardinals.
The Cardinals, yeah.
Yeah, but credit to them for coming back and credit to Danny Dimes and company for completing the win here. But yeah, so they have a very interesting backfield situation here. And I guess you're right. By default, Breida is the guy, but you can't have crazy high expectations.
So it's Jerome Ford. Is it Tony Jones over Breida or Breida over Jones?
I would say Tony Jones, but you have to again. This is it's the Tuesday show, right? Yep. We don't know what's going to happen with Jamal Williams. We don't know what's going to happen with Kendre Miller. To be honest, over these next couple of days here, so it's very, very difficult to say. You know what? I'd say go with Breida because we're talking about 1 week situations here. But man, you don't really feel that good about it.
Well, and then I think you can even add Craig Reynolds, who is possibly the starting running back for the Lions. I don't know what they're doing with Jahmyr Gibbs. We'll talk about that in a second. But David Montgomery was carted off in their loss to the Seahawks, was supposedly going to be out for multiple weeks. I think that either came from David Montgomery or a coaching staff of the Lions. And then they said, no, actually, he's day-to-day. Yeah. Okay,
like
great.
Within our same RotoWire update, we have 2 people saying one guy says he's day to day, one guy says he's expected to be a couple of weeks. He got carted off the field, right?
Right.
So
Yes.
So I was in the car on the way to a show on Sunday night, watching Red Zone and getting all the notifications on my phone. I was like, oh no, David Montgomery got carted off, and I was looking for it. I was looking for it on Twitter. I was like, this isn't like nothing like what happened to Nick Chubb last week, So this is he'll be back. Obviously I don't intend to I intend to keep David Montgomery in my roster on the leagues that I have him because he was becoming a useful 10, 11 points every week here. Craig Netflix Reynolds, right? They call him that to separate because even I mixed him up with Josh Reynolds, a receiver we might talk about a little bit later. But no, he kind of steps into that David Montgomery role, right? Because I think the Lions, some people will say the Lions, bitter fantasy managers, right, will say the Lions are underutilizing Jahmyr Gibbs. I think real life football people probably are like, okay, they intend to be a playoff team and they don't want him to hit a rookie wall, right? So there's 10 carries out there for someone who's not Jahmyr Gibbs because I don't think they're going to give him 25 touches in week 2 or in week 3. That's just not realistic, right? So assuming Montgomery misses a couple weeks. Yeah, Craig Reynolds is definitely in play, and he's only rostered in 13% of leagues. Like,
I'm surprised it's that high.
Yeah, if you put say you really you're aggressive, but maybe not quite as 80% aggressive, and want to go 65% aggressive of your FAAB on Jerome Ford. Craig Reynolds is definitely one of those smaller backup bids you put in as a consolation prize, just so you have somebody to start this week in case. Because don't get me wrong, there's gonna be a lot of leagues where there's some guy in the league who lost Chubb. It knows they're not going to be active on waiver wire for much of the season anyway. Throws all of their remaining budget on a guy like Ford or a guy like Kyren Williams if he's available, who did repeat. With the questions here, Kyren Williams, we still rank him a little bit ahead. Because of his role is so solid, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, guys like Craig Reynolds, Tony Jones, Breida, like these are still guys you put in because listen, if you're a FAAB or a Chubb or a Barkley owner, you got to get somebody to start this week. And those are guys that are at least startable.
And they will have prominent roles at least for week 1. I like this question a bit, and I'm showing it on the broadcast here. Yo asks, Gainwell's coming off of injured reserve. He has to drop somebody. Does he drop Gainwell, Joshua Kelly, or Roschon Johnson? Roschon Johnson got a few more carries. Deonta Foreman was a healthy and active for the Bears this past week in their loss to the Buccaneers. Joshua Kelly obviously starts with Eckler out, and we don't know Eckler's status as of right now. That's a tricky one because I think if you drop Roschon, you definitely risk him to being picked up by waivers. You can't really drop Joshua Kelly after starting and possibly starting another week. And then there's Gainwell, who looked really good in week 1 and then obviously didn't play week 2.
Yeah. So I had to double check on Eckler, and right now there's no timeline, right? Because my first instinct was just Josh Kelly because he was there. He got bottled up so bad this week. And there's such
Titans
weird
run defense is
stats.
good.
Yes, there's weird stats with Josh Kelly where he's averaging less than 5 fantasy points a game in games that he plays that Eckler does not start. and that's weird. That's counterintuitive. So like,
Right.
yeah, you're thinking that. So I agree. You probably want to keep Roshan. Kelly was my first instinct, but this whole no timetable at all for Eckler maybe swings it back in the direction of Gainwell. I mean, they've got the Vikings and the Raiders coming up, who
That's
short
why I keep
sample
Kelly.
size, but they're in the bottom 10 run defenses, in the league here. And God, it's tough to say, but how much of Gainwell's week one, I know I drank that Kool-Aid. Definitely
Yeah, you did.
I definitely drank that Kool-Aid, and I think I wanted to self-speak it, having rostering him in a dynasty league and wanting to get something out of him, right? So how much of his week one was because they knew they had to play a game in 4 days? And they wanted
Right.
to kind of conserve DeAndre Swift to go out and do what he did. It's going to be messy all year long in the committee there. So
I think my answer is Roshan, and I recognize I with Deonta Foreman healthy and active, Roshan has already clearly played as the number 2. They play the Chiefs this week. There's blowout possibility. There's one of 2 teams favored by 13 points. The Bears are on the opposite side of that equation, and rightfully so against them. I think I drop Roshan and hope that I can pick him back up again. It's tough though. I mean, maybe
That's
look to trade.
yep.
You look to trade one of them and maybe get a fringe receiver or
Mhm.
something to that effect. That's a
Yeah.
really great question that I don't have a specific answer to.
When I
So,
take a step back, it's close enough where you're looking at all 3 of the offenses. You got the Philly offense, you got the Chargers offense. Those are 2 teams that can make it to the Super Bowl, and then the Bears offense that can make it to a top 5 pick in the NFL draft here, right? So I guess based on that logic and that Roshan's the clear RB2, you're probably right. I'm going to definitely agree with you there. But I've got a bunch of other drops here that other people can definitely look at. I mean, Deontay Foreman, right? He's a drop.
Yep.
Can't really mess with him anymore. I have Rashad Penny on the drop list, right?
Yep.
Because
Easy.
there was a game where, so let's just recap here. Gainwell was out. Boston Scott left the Thursday night football game with a concussion, and the only time Rashad Penny saw the field over DeAndre Swift was when Swift was like basically gassed and needed oxygen after just gashing that defense over and over again. So Penny, when Gainwell comes back, is he has no spot being rostered in the league. Obviously, Deontay Foreman, that's an easy one. Deion Jackson's an easy one. We didn't really talk a ton about Zack Moss last week. Because he was injured before week 1, and he knew he was going to come in. But Deion Jackson in his opportunity week 1 did not look good. He had the fumble. He wasn't really all that effective. And then this week, Zack Moss is out there for something like almost 100% of the running back snaps. I had it up here. 98% of the overall snaps, Zack Moss was out there, right?
Yeah.
So with that on there, Deion Jackson can definitely be cut. I put the Tampa Bay backup, Wilson, on there.
Sean Tucker.
Or Tucker, Sean Wilson.
Yeah.
Sean Tucker,
And I had
whatever.
said Chase
what I
Edmonds
was
as well,
thinking in my
too.
head.
That's okay. That was last week.
Yeah,
Chase
both of
Edmonds.
those guys can be cut. What are you doing with Cam Akers? You cut him in a 10-teamer?
Yeah, I am trying and hoping and willing, much like you were with Kenny Gainwell, that Akers does get traded. I don't think he does, but I would immediately, once that news happens and you get one of your Adam Schefter phone alerts or sleep or whatever app you're using, Cam Akers was traded for a conditional 7th-round pick. Hey guys, who wants Cam Akers? That guy's awful. I mean, evidently he's a locker room cancer. I have no idea if that's true, but I watched him play now for the past year and a half. He's not good. He's not good at the game of football, and I would try to capitalize however I could. If I can't, I will cut him. And I think that's one of those danger zone players who's on your roster, taking up space but not doing anything, and you can't get enough value for him ever. That's how Cam Akers has been the past year now.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm right with you there. And then you had a couple interesting cuts. I put Charbonnet on there last week.
You did,
and
yeah.
you weren't.
I was adamant,
quite
don't
sure
do
about
it.
that. Yeah, exactly. It was like, okay, he's one of those like I did with Penny, basically. Like, okay, I'm benching him for sure, but if there's nothing this week, we're off here. And also, I'm sitting on Chase Brown in the league as well.
Yeah,
16 teamers, so it's tough to cut because they're, these guys aren't available. I mean, Jerome Ford might be available, so of course that's an easy swap.
So it's a hard question to ask yourself, and you could do this in a 16-team, 14-team, even 12-team, right? If you have Charbonnet or Chase Brown, you were never rostering them to be an impact right now, right? Like that was never the goal. It was if Kenneth Walker or Joe Mixon went down, these guys would be clear starters, and people that you'd have to do what we are doing with Jerome Ford right now. Oh, I got to spend 80% of my budget to get possibly the starting running back for the Browns. I feel confident in Charbonnet's talent. And I looked at the list, and it was really Jerome Ford or Charbonnet, and I said I'm going to go with Charbonnet because I don't want to spend all of that FAAB on anything that's not sure. But also with Chase Brown, like Trayvon Williams is playing more than him. And Chris Evans kind of factoring in too. Like, I'm not convinced if Joe Mixon were to go down that Chase Brown is the guy. So that's where the cutoff is for me, that I would drop Chase Brown for Matt Breida or Tony Jones or any one of those like fringe guys, not just the Jerome Fords.
Exactly. And if you really want to have the handcuff conversation, I put a couple guys on here. Ty Chandler from Minnesota is 5% rostered. There's got to be a chance that he's more explosive than Madison, right? Madison has just not looked all that impressive here, given this opportunity. Everyone assumed that the opportunity was there and he was going to be productive and used high draft capital on him. But Todd Chandler should get a chance sooner or later. And Tajay Spears is 17% rostered in Yahoo leagues. He got 8 carries for 49 yards last week. That's not nothing. That's standalone. It's desperation flex value when bye weeks come, but it's still value with the potential, for.
And what he did in week 1, where he got more snaps than Derrick Henry, almost caught that touchdown, but Ryan Tannehill is so bad against the Saints. Yeah, no, Tajay Spears is a great one. I'm not in on Ty Chandler. I think that guy is possibly one of the worst backup running backs in the league, and it just goes to show how bad the Vikings' overall situation is. But Tajay Spears, I'm right there with you on that. So just to recap, put a bow on this. You're putting a 35 to 40% keep him honest bid on Jerome Ford. If you are of the belief, like you and I are, Jake, that he's going to be the starting running back for the Browns. Like if you think they're trading for Cam Akers
or Chubb owner
or Kareem Hunt, fine. But I really, truly believe Ford is going to be your starter for as long as he's healthy. And if they acquire Hunt or if they acquire Akers or something like that, it will be to back up Jerome Ford. So I'm at minimum 35, 40%. Matt Breida, Tony Jones. I think I'd have Breida over Jones. But Jones is certainly a pickable up option. I don't know if that's a word I just made.
And then Craig Reynolds kind of gets in that same tier mix as well, right? So like if you're a Chubb or a Saquon owner, you look for Kyren Williams first, right? No doubt about that. Then you look for Ford, and then you might as well check on Zack Moss and Gus Edwards, who are a little bit over our thresholds, but they're around. And then then after that, you put backup bids on the Breida, Craig, Jones tier. Right, because you still need a starter for this week, most likely. Unless you're lucky enough to have depth on your bench. If you were lucky enough to not get hit with a running back injury yet, but there's still dead weight on your roster, then maybe you start looking at adding, Tajay Spears, because those guys, those handcuff type guys, are going to fly under the radar this week with the high profile running back names that are out there.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that's the first time ever. We've had major running back injuries before. We've had major injuries before, but never began the show with the running back position. We normally go quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. We have a system, Jake. It's been an effective system, but this is important, I thought, for
drop a comment if you want us to switch it up. We're always down for
always
feedback.
Target whatever one.
Yeah, exactly. Especially there's an easy transition from Monday Night Football into running backs, but we're definitely going to hit all the rest of the positions here for you soon.
Yeah, let's dive into those quarterbacks. Before we do so, we're going to take a word from our sponsors, Blue Wire, and obviously if you're watching, being a quick pause, but if you are listening, a bit of ads in between here. All right, we're back and talking about the quarterback position. I mean, it's one of those that really hasn't been impacted too much. You had Aaron Rodgers get injured and was already kind of a fringe starter anyway. I don't think we're at the point of the season where super flex streaming QBs are really out there quite yet. I mean, Jordan Love, 6 touchdowns down the past 2 games. Exactly. Hasn't went over 200 passing yards or whatever it is, not too much further. But he is in consideration. My concern is Saints defense looking like it's vintage Saints defense, especially now that Marshawn Lattimore has been healthy.
Yes, I agree. The Panthers struggle with them all night, and I think the Packers' offense is better than the Panthers. And I think especially the case if they get Christian Watson back this week, which it seems like it's the case. But yeah, quarterbacks, part of the reason we bumped them down this week is because there are some guys that are in our threshold. But I looked across 8 of my most important leagues, and I was like, I either have an upper tier quarterback that I certainly wouldn't be dropping, and they're not necessarily better than the backup quarterbacks I selected in the leagues where I did take a backup quarterback, right? So I threw down Derek Carr at 40% at the Packers here because that Packers defense, as talented as they are, can still be got once in a while, and I think the Saints are showing, even though they didn't light it up from a passing perspective on Monday night. I think they're showing that they have 3 solid wide receivers that can go to. So Jair shutting down one of them is not going to hurt the Saints attack here. So Derek Carr 40% at Green Bay if you find yourself in a pinch. Matthew Stafford has been surprisingly serviceable, and Cincinnati hasn't looked exactly great. Stafford's 35% rostered. Threw Desmond Ridder on there. I don't love that. He probably actually the next guy's going to the 2 quarterback leagues, right? Because is Josh Dobbs back on the market in 2 quarterback leagues? I'm in a 12-team 2 quarterback league where Josh Dobbs is not rostered, right? So I threw him in there. Guys like Ritter and Stroud are rostered, 5 and 10% respectively. Stroud actually looked all right. He hasn't thrown an interception yet. He's they're tailoring a game plan to him. He's got rapport with Tank Dell, who I guess we'll
Nico
talk
Collins
about a little bit down the way. Yeah, of course, Nico Collins. Nico Collins is looking like wide receiver 1 this season, right? He's what we wanted from Jamar Chase. But no, so moral of the story here is we still like Jordan Love at 61%, but it's a tougher matchup this week. There are some streamers out there, but there aren't any easy drops at quarterback. Nobody got hurt. Nobody has played poorly enough from that top tier that we actually want to dump already. So the quarterbacks was just a list of streamers. You maybe consider some guys, but yeah, there's not much out there for you.
Yeah, and we're getting a lot of questions in the chat, like let's do a 1-for-1 trade. In this case, someone had said, do you trade Jamar Chase for Tony Pollard? I was asking more details to get a firmer idea of the roster.
I don't need any more details. I still take the Chase side of that.
Well, I actually said Pollard. You can look at the roster in there, but that's not the point. I'm mentioning this only because I think if you want to do 1-for-1 trades right now, week 2 in the season, it just gets really tricky, especially with all the running back injuries you have. But the way I would operate with these, I'm going to throw in X quarterback and try to bump up a little bit more. Like it's almost like the Dwight Schrute, I'm going to trade a penny, whatever it was, and go ahead and have a car by the end of the thing. Or I know they did that in The Office, but
the telescope, and then he traded it for the magic beans that Jim had.
Yes, thank you, Jake. You clearly have your Peacock subscription update, unlike mine. But yeah, that's I think there are ways to do that right now in the season to get just a little bit more, get a little bit more assets, get a bit more value. And 1-for-1 trades are a little bit difficult to pull off at the moment. The quarterback position is where I would be trying to 1-for-1 trade up. And Kirk Cousins has been insane and obviously producing at the top 3 level right now. Vikings defense sure looks bad. Maybe you don't want to trade up from Kirk Cousins. How about Dak Prescott, though? Michael Parsons going insane. Cowboys defense looking real good. The Dak doesn't have to do a whole lot. Like there's guys that would inch up. And if you're worried about Joe Burrow, for example, we didn't even talk about his injury, whether or not he plays. We won't know because that game is Monday. And again, we do this on Tuesday. Yeah, you're like frowning. Yeah, Joe Burrow actually might.
Joe Burrow injury?
Yes, he re-aggravated the calf strain.
I was tuned in all Sunday until Sunday Night Football. That's the only game I missed. They're to go see the best band in the world, Goose. I got to give them a shout out.
Yeah, the Bengals are being very coy about what Burrow's status is going to be, and of course he's part of the doubleheader next Monday as well too. But I'm just point being, if you want to trade up a little bit, that might be the position in which you could do so. Because I'll feel confident acquiring Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, obviously Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. There might be ways to incrementally step up to get those players. We don't need to talk about Joe Burrow's one because you're not picking up the backup for the Bengals if he doesn't play. And that's also why I'm a little bit more comfortable trading Jamar Chase away.
Browning. Okay, just throwing that out there because it is the quarterback.
Quarterback backup for Joe Burrow. That's what his name is. He doesn't have anything else.
Jake Browning. Okay. Yeah, I'm not even bidding on him in Fishbowl where I don't have a quarterback to start after Rodgers and Lance were out of the picture for me.
Do you have anything else you want to talk about with quarterbacks?
Nothing on quarterbacks. We can hit the ad.
Okay. Let's get a word from our sponsors, Bettor Vision. I think we can all agree that fantasy sports is awesome. So is daily fantasy and sports betting. That's why we have so many accounts. What's not awesome, let's go into a bunch of different apps to find the best odds and manage all your fantasy lineups. Enter Bettor Vision. That's Bettor Vision. Bettor Vision is the only app that syncs all of your fantasy, DFS, and sportsbook accounts in one place. They only show you the best odds for every bet, so you'll always get the best value. And our dashboard, or at least theirs, is the only one-stop shop to track all of your fantasy matchups, DFS picks, and bets. Visit Bettor Vision, Bettor Vision.us to download Bettor Vision today. I've loved using that. We don't have to do a plug, but I found that to be very successful in a lot of situations too. Factoring in the prize pick stuff would be great, but otherwise, if you're in a state that I can actually gamble, that's where Bettor Vision has been really impactful for me. So,
or if you're just 40 minutes from the border of a state that actually wants my tax money and not the state of Wisconsin. But anyway.
Yes, good point, Jake. Let's also get a word from our sponsors, Rival Fantasy. If you're looking for a place to play head-to-head fantasy football games without the huge tournaments, salary caps, or complicated game times, then Rival Fantasy is where you want to play this NFL season. From a twist on a classic game with Fantasy Bingo, where players generate a lineup to complete achievements to get bingo, to a head-to-head fantasy challenge where you pick which of two players score more fantasy points than the other. Well, this is the best version of fantasy sports too. For the 2023 NFL season, Rival Fantasy is offering new users a $200 deposit. Oh my goodness. A $200 deposit match plus a 25 first play voucher. Rival Fantasy is so confident. You'll love the experience. They're giving you money to play right out of the gate. Experience the future of fantasy sports on Rival Fantasy and become a rival today. All right, so I want to talk about wide receivers. We had mentioned, obviously, Puka Nacua as one of the top ones. He's only rostered in 77% of leagues. That needs to be 100. I don't care if you're in your 14 league. Puka Nacua is starting so long as Cooper Kupp is out. So keep it in mind. We had talked about Rashid Shaheed, Allen Robinson, Josh Reynolds, Kendrick Bourne, all last week. I want to actually start. I know on our score sheet we have Tutu Atwell.
These three are all pretty equal in my eyes, and they all have some. They all have some things that there are four names that are, or five names, I guess, that I wrote down. And the first four are all pretty interchangeable. But like, if you need a receiver or are just trying to make your roster better with backup bids, these are some of the guys you want to look at.
I was going to start with one that I actually add to the list, and that was Josh Reynolds, receiver for the Lions, and of course was a Ram when Jared Goff was a Ram. They had a connection then, still have a connection now. I think he's at over close to 200 receiving yards or near that point. But for me, more importantly, Amon-Ra St. Brown left Sunday's game, again, the loss to the Seahawks. They, being the Lions, said it was a cramp or cramps. That's why he was leaving.
Yep.
But it was since reported, or at least I think it's alluded to. I don't know if the Lions have officially confirmed it. We'll see Wednesday. He's dealing with turf toe. Now, Terry McLaurin dealing with turf toe as well too. He's been playing through it totally fine. Got the touchdown catch against the Broncos in their win. That's a tough injury, and you have Jameson Williams still suspended for another month yet. Khalif Raymond is there as your speed threat. You have Sam Laporta, who's been a great intermediate target.
Sam Laporta should be getting bumped up here too. You know, he's 65%, but you know, with the status of where tight ends are, he needs to be closer to 100%.
I think Josh Reynolds actually might be my favorite receiver target, even without speculating on Amon-Ra St. Brown's injury. He has been automatic for an offense that has been pretty darn automatic as well, too, through 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, you're right. Josh Reynolds is actually only 14% rostered in Yahoo leagues. I didn't have him down originally because I know we touched on him the week before, but there's definitely new circumstances that make the situation. Yeah, I missed it. I had kind of seen something about turf toe, but the first thing I saw was cramps, so there were conflicting reports. If Amon-Ra is going to be slowed down in any sense of the way, and they're missing one of their running backs, they're just down guys on offense here, and I still think they're going to be capable, so that means probably a lot of targets for Josh Reynolds, and I can get on board because each of these other three guys we're going to talk about has at least one red flag or one issue that I can't say the same with Reynolds.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say is you did mention Jameson Williams. It's tough to stomach this, but you know, if this turf toe thing is going to be nagging for Amon-Ra, I would see if someone cut Jameson Williams and if you can stomach rostering him for another couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's just hard, especially if you don't get injured reserve qualification for somebody who's suspended.
Which you don't
have
in the majority of formats,
right.
I believe. Definitely
right.
can in my Yahoo league, which I think is right.
Right, yeah. I would have a hard time with that, but I think Josh Reynolds right now is a wide receiver 3 or flex play, especially with all the running backs injured. Theoretically, you're moving them up into your starting lineup. You have to find a replacement. I think Reynolds against the Falcons this week, obviously in a dome, so Jared Goff should be fine. Looks like a quarterback when he plays in a dome. That's huge. So I like Josh Reynolds as probably my favorite target. That being said, Tutu Atwell it has been getting an enormous amount of targets as well for the Rams. Again, they play the Bengals, who could be without Joe Burrow. We don't know. But either way, that Rams offense has not been able to effectively move the ball on the ground, even though Kyren Williams has been a goal line beast. Tutu Atwell, Puka Nacua, I think it's going to be Tutu that loses out if and when Cooper Kupp returns.
Sure.
But you still have 2 more weeks of a guy that's been getting 10-plus targets a game.
Yeah, obviously 15 for 147 for Puka can't be ignored. But what he's doing is overshadowing what's been a very productive stretch from Tutu Atwell. And, of course, I mentioned, there's a red flag with each and every one of these guys, right? It's that he's wide receiver 2 now and what happens when Kupp comes back. But Tutu Atwell, more snaps than Puka. That's 95% to 85%. Color coding makes it harder to see here. I gotta zoom in here. And then let's see, and then the route run percentage, Tutu's 96%, Nakua's 84%. So theoretically, these two should be a little bit closer in production than what they currently are. And Tutu's still productive, 7 for 77, and he even got a carry this week. So you can't ignore him. He is playable in leagues where you have to, and I know there are Deontay Johnson and Cooper Kupp and guys. There are people that were that were just stuck with wide receiver injuries. It's not quite as much as running backs this week, but there are definitely scenarios in which Tutu Atwell squeaks into the lineup. I'm rostering him in a 12-team league, not quite starting him, but not quite ready to drop him until I see what his role is when Cup comes back.
Yeah, I think if you were to say I like Tutu more than Josh Reynolds, totally understand. I like both of them, and both have plenty of viability, especially if you are in need of a flex or wide receiver 3 in full point PPR leagues. Then there's Tank Dell, who it's interesting. He's 5'7", a little bit underweight as well too. But if the Texans' offense is going to be in situations where they're trailing, and even though Will Anderson's been a great addition to that defense, the Texans just aren't a good team yet. That's okay. Then Nico Collins and Tank Dell and Robert Woods all have some fantasy value because it's not Davis Mills throwing the ball anymore. CJ Stroud has looked semi-competent. I have Tank Dell a step below all three of these guys, and I'm playing in deeper leagues where I still wouldn't consider him. There's going to be someone that likes Tank Dell more than I do.
Yeah,
but he's
exactly.
a good enough asset.
No, the red flag here is that he's the second wide receiver on the Texans and a clear second receiver on the Texans with the rookie quarterback, who I mentioned earlier in the show doesn't actually look that terrible this year.
Right.
CJ Stroud's been looking okay, moving the ball relatively well. What's interesting here is Nico Collins, who's obviously been the most productive. He's creeping into must-start territory for your fantasy leagues here. It's actually Robert Woods that sees the most snaps out of all the receivers, and number 2 is Tank Dell at 78% last week. Well, Collins was only at 62%. And Tank Dell also ran 4 more routes than Nico Collins here and 3 less routes than Robert Woods. So that's interesting. Tank Dell actually led the team in targets with 10, too. So that's the thing, too. Ended up with 7 for 72 and a touchdown. I would imagine that this will be one of his better games when it's all said and done, but he definitely warrants a mention on the show.
Absolutely. And then another rookie, Jayden Reed, stepping up with his 2 touchdowns in that loss to the Falcons. The Packers have been able to scheme guys openly and effectively in the red zone and kind of like short situations, but not 3rd and 1s, because we have to make sure A.J. Dillon trips over himself in every 3rd and 1 scenario moving forward.
Absolutely.
I like Jayden Reed, and I thought he kind of popped in the preseason as well too, and now he's doing it against real NFL starters. But there does become a point. Jordan Love hasn't attempted, more than 25 passes in a single game. If and when Aaron Jones comes back, I would imagine they pass even less. Christian Watson's return doesn't mean they pass more. It just means they have a bigger shot at a big play. So I get a little bit concerned about Jayden Reed, and I think even in deeper leagues, it's a little bit tougher for me to stomach rostering him.
The speculation that I saw is that when Watson comes back, maybe Reed plays an equivalent or greater amount of snaps than Dobbs, because in theory the Packers have more draft capital invested in Jayden Reed, right? But I don't think that's quite the correct narrative here that we should be following here, because we know the chemistry between Love and Dobbs in the red zone and just in general. And I believe there was a Dobbs throw that Love missed where there was a complete busted coverage that would have been an easy touchdown at the end of that game. You can play what if all you want. Reed is explosive. They design plays for him. That's great. He will still have a couple of plays designed, but I still think it's Watson 1, Dobbs 2, and then don't forget here that Luke Musgrave is out on the field for 87% of the snaps, running routes on 80 as a route run rate of 89% here. Musgrave actually ran more routes than both Dobbs and Reed last week, which is a funny thing. Which we'll hit when we get to tight ends. He only had like 3.5 fantasy points last week, but if you're following these numbers, he's definitely going to pop one of these weeks in the situation here. But we'll get to that in a bit. Reed is a playmaker. I put it on there, but again, the red flag with Dallas, he's a Texan. The red flag with Atwell is he's what happens when Cup comes back. The red flag with Reed is does he have the same value after Christian Watson returns? And that's tough, but I still think he's worth a bench spot over a lot of guys here. I put a couple drops on the list, but I want to hit a wild card real quick too. But anything else on Jayden Reed? I mean, we can talk about him forever.
I just want to say, for people that are struggling to understand the concept of Reed, think about a Packers Aaron Rodgers offense that with Aaron Rodgers injured, right? Like kind of like last season where he's just not passing as much, or if he is, they're very short throws. If he has 40 attempts, your average depth target or throw is like 7.5 yards, whatever. Yeah.
Reed actually didn't get a carry this week either. Yeah.
It's like the Randall Cobb guy in that offense. So great. Not quite the first down machine that Randall Cobb was, because he had that innate connection with Aaron Rodgers, but they would have some schematic things where Randall Cobb could get open. He's got good big playability when he has the ball, but you're not focusing on Randall Cobb in the same way you're not doing that for Jayden Reed too. So I think that's my That's the way I would go ahead and structure it if you're trying to understand what that looks like in this new era of Green Bay Packers football. Go ahead and mention your wild card, Jake.
I threw Jalen Hyatt out there because he made a couple of big, long plays in the comeback against Arizona. And so far, I mean, the Giants' offense isn't great. The thing with the Giants' offense is that their receivers, they all look the same on paper, right? So there's room for one of them to emerge here. So Jalen Hyatt is one of my very cheap bench stashes in one of my leagues that I can afford it, hoping that he turns into somewhat of a keeper here. So, yeah, he's only 12% rostered. You can do worse. I would drop Van Jefferson for him. I would consider dropping Rashad Bateman. It gets really close here.
Odell Beckham got injured in that Ravens game, and it sounds like it's not actually a good injury, no injury is good, but he could miss some time. So I'm not giving up Bateman just yet.
Yeah, Bateman's had a tough time. I didn't realize that he had a Lisfranc injury last year. That somehow that slipped, and just coming back from it, he's not quite the same yet. So maybe he gets it going eventually. But I still think Mandrews is the wide receiver one there, and I'm definitely losing some faith in Bateman, and love what I've been seeing from Zay Flowers, on the side here. Alec Pierce is also playing a ton, but it's not turned into a ton of productivity. I don't know what's going on with Richardson. Richardson also left the game, I believe,
with the concussion. Yeah.
So we'll see what's going on there here. It was a thin week for wide receivers, far thinner than last week. It was definitely the running backs that we focused on this week here. But no, I kind of like Jalen Hyatt. He's one of those guys that could be in for a late season emergence. Maybe not quite of Justin Jefferson caliber, but he was the leading receiver here. The targets didn't look great here, and the amount of snaps isn't great yet either. But perhaps the production this week and his help could lead to them giving him more opportunities. It's a spec ad.
There's a few tight ends I think that could actually be added as well too. I want to get to that before we do so. Word from our sponsors, Vivid Seats. Kick off the NFL season with Vivid Seats and score tickets to all of the hottest matchups and biggest games of the year. Catch every pass, every tackle, and every heart-pounding play of your favorite team live and in person. And with Vivid Seat Rewards, now you earn rewards with every single purchase. Each ticket you get gets you closer to your reward. Buy 10 tickets, then cash in your credit toward your 11th ticket purchase. It's that easy. Plus, Vivid Sports is offering you $20 off your first $200 ticket purchase with promo code RotoWire. That's code ROTOWIRE from the 50-yard line to the upper deck. Vivid Seats has great tickets for all the 2023 games that matter to you. Just visit vividseats.com or download the app today. So last week we had talked about Zach Ertz at tight end, Adam Troutman with Greg Dulcich now on injured reserve. We mentioned Logan Thomas. Well, he goes against the Cardinals. Durham Smythe for the Dolphins as well too. Hunter Henry was in that equation, playing plenty of time for the Patriots. Mm-hmm. It's a returning guy that we mentioned last week that I think becomes the top pickup for tight ends.
Mm-hmm. I mean, okay, Hunter Henry is at 56% right now. I think it's back-to-back weeks now with 50 yards and a touchdown. So I would argue that Hunter Henry might be the top tight end pickup if he's out there, which he's barely missing our threshold, so I have to mention him. He was out there for 92% of snaps and had an 87% route run rate, which is, I think it was somewhere in the means of a 20% bump over Mike Gesicki in both categories there. So I think we have one guy who's standing out as the fantasy option in New England. With a carousel of receivers, I mean, Devontae Parker's return basically kicked Kendrick Bourne down to the curb now, but the tight end position seems solid there. But the number 2 target for me is someone who is far more readily available, someone that we're finding is not so available in our deep dynasty leagues, in Scott Fishbowl, in a variety of industry leagues. But Zach Ertz is only 11% in your average Yahoo league here. He has a 29. Now this isn't a route rate percentage stat. This is a target share. 29.5% of the Arizona Cardinals targets are going to Zach Ertz. I think everyone's big worry about Ertz going into the season was that he wasn't quite going to be healthy after suffering that injury later on last year. He's somehow recovered. He's back out there. He's ready to go, averaging 9 targets a game. He's tight end 8 in PPR, and I put on here just as a joke to quote Coach Prime. Do you believe now, Joe? Because I know we were a little skeptical early on.
No, but it's still my answer.
Yeah, no, it's still the answer here. I am going to. I mean, geez. You got to start Ertz over Kyle Pitts at this point.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are.
I'm starting Ertz over Pitts, Freiermuth, maybe even Dallas Goedert. I mean, like that. It was those tight ends 7 through 10 that you're like, oh, one of them is going to pop. I made a bet with Alan Slazowski that one of them is going to pop over Darren Waller. He gave me the field of those 3 over Darren Waller. I was like, oh yeah, this is an easy one. I look so stupid. Alan, I can pay you right now if you're listening. I apologize. You were so right. I was so wrong. I can't believe that none of these three guys have really made much of a difference. And I think Zach Ertz does become the starter. I would play Sam Laporta over those guys. I don't know about Musgrave yet, but getting close. It's been really, really brutal. If you chose to, I mean, not that you've had a lot of success with George Kittle either. Hawkinson was awful week 1, got the touchdowns in week 2 here. It's the tight end position is just tough overall, which was our whole point. But Zach Ertz is going to be available on the waiver wire and gets you 8 points in PPR. That probably is top 5 every single week moving forward.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I mean, it's not just he's out on the field and he's running routes. It's production too, which is something that, like, I have to throw Luke Musgrave on here again because he meets our threshold at 24%. I know the production hasn't 100% followed, but Musgrave is almost out on the field and running more routes than Ertz. I mean, it's tough to compare these apples and oranges, but like you look at someone like Musgrave, the production hasn't quite followed what the model says he should be doing quite yet.
Yeah.
Ertz meets those expectations, which is why he is one of the top pickups and guys above our threshold here. You had some interesting deep flyers here, and I think we should definitely hit them because, I'm not going to lie. I picked up Durham Smythe in Fishbowl, and he had 10 points on my bench, which is better than some of the people that I started here. So let's talk about some deep. There's 2 tight end leagues. There's 2 PPR, double PPR for tight end leagues. Let's hit a couple flyers here.
Yeah, the Durham Smythe one's actually pretty good. Again, Dolphins tight end, you always think about Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle's in concussion protocol. We'll see if he does play. But he's getting a lot of targets, and I think for that offense it makes sense. I had first mentioned Donald Parham, at least on our score sheet here, and we talked about him a little bit last week. He got the touchdown. He had 3 catches for 21 yards. You wouldn't think after, I think he only got 1 catch in the loss to the Titans, that you want to go ahead and pick up Parham. I'm just putting it on your guys' radar right now that he ended up having more snaps than Gerald Everett, who is thought to be the starting tight end for the Chargers. He had 3 catches for 47 yards. Stone Smart, their third tight end, also got 22 snaps. He had a big play. There's at least 1 play per game where the Chargers will scheme up a deep shot to the tight end. Justin Herbert, for whatever the reason, is really good at hitting those intermediate to deep shots to tight ends. Parham is far more explosive. 6'8", and has been a capable
the Chargers
receiver
guy. You definitely always had a thing for Parham. Well, the thing is he really all that different from Juwan Johnson at this point? And people are keeping Juwan Johnson and overlooking Parham, right?
Right.
When maybe we're really splitting hairs here when we're talking about these 2 in the rankings, but
I think
very
with
similar.
The way the Saints are using Taysom Hill at this point, they are pretty similar. But one is going to be your starting tight end for the Chargers at some point in the season, and Parham, provided again he stays healthy, and might phase out Everett. Everett's still going to play, but I think there's a point where Parham, especially if you're in deeper leagues, like I would say right now, Jake, in your Scott Fishbowl, you should consider Parham because that system, I think it's either 1.5 points per reception for tight ends or some weird stuff with touchdowns or first downs. Like I think Parham actually is a really interesting name. The other one, and I'm thinking about this specifically in the RotoWire Online Championships, I was looking at a guy to replace Kyle Pitts. Kylen Granson, starting tight end for the Colts. They use their tight ends a lot. I'm not worried if Richardson weren't to play, if there's going to be a downgrade. The only issue is they have a lot of tight ends, and they all kind of do the same thing. And you don't need one to do better than the other. But Kylen Granson, when healthy, has been consistently the guy, and I put that in quotes because it's a negative, for the Colts. 3 catches, 15 yards, and a touchdown last week. I think he's in consideration too. I might play him over Kyle Pitts this week.
My thought has always been Granson between the 20s, Mo Alley Cox in the red zone there, right?
Yep.
And then we have to see what happens there. But I don't know. Granson was decent in the snaps and routes, significantly more than Mo Alley Cox or Will Mallory here. Not really getting much for air yards, but a red zone target, it's certainly possible for him. I'm totally okay with that. I hear you there. I will tell you that you have some drops on this list, and I have Michael Mayer in Fishbowl, and he's very close to.
I'm picking up Parham over Mayer for that example.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I mean Mayer only had 1 target, and it was a 2-yard gain this past week here. I'm not confident enough that they're ready to use him or want to use him in the way that some fantasy managers were expecting. So he's definitely on the drop list. Austin Hooper, I agree with you on that drop list. I might still be willing to wait out Irv Smith. It kind of depends on Joe Burrow. If we end up with Browning as the quarterback for multiple weeks, I'll probably drop Irv Smith. And then Juwan Johnson I'm hanging on to in a 14-team league. But anything less than that, he can definitely be on the chopping block.
I had wrote down I would rather have Zach Ertz and Kylen, Granson, and Luke Musgrave over Chigi Kankwu, Noah Fant, Dawson Knox, Cole Kmet, Dalton Schultz. I wanted to specify the language. I'd rather have them over than those guys. You could cut them. I think it may be a bit aggressive for a few of them, but that doesn't mean you have to. Like, there might be better roster spots to cut. And I think a perfect example actually was a comment that just happened here. Would you drop Freiermuth or Njoku for Jerome Ford? And that's really tricky. Freiermuth hasn't been super involved. Matt Canada as an offensive coordinator is awful for the Steelers. Njoku got, I think, either 4 or 5 receptions last night, had the fumble, didn't do a whole lot. Deshaun Watson doesn't look good. Like, all these guys, tight ends 7 through 13 are just gross.
Yeah,
It's
welcome to
just
my
a tough
world.
spot.
I punted tight end, took Njoku and Juwan Johnson in a 16-teamer it is actually.
Not great.
So that'll be interesting here. Someone mentioned Cade Otton, and I kind of overlooked him, but he was out on the field for 97% of snaps and ran routes on 79% of those, passing plays. So, and he ended up with 6 for 41. That's not nothing.
It's not. Real quick, tee up the streaming QBs because there's a few questions people have that I want to have set for us.
We should
before
definitely
the
do
end
an
of the show.
overall recap here at the end for
Yes.
anyone that joined us late. I'll quick hit streaming defenses. Chiefs, last night when I wrote this down, the Chiefs were my first choice in the 39% rostered at home against the Bears with Chris Jones back. I also looked, and you're looking ahead for another week. They get the Jets next week, which Zach Wilson Jets always going to present opportunities, and that hunch was confirmed with our streaming defenses article on the site today, as well was matched with our number 2, the Seahawks, 8%. Kind of had a rough go of it against the Lions last week, but they're home against Carolina, who, I know Carolina had the Saints, but they really struggled to move the ball here. Their running game doesn't look all that solid, and they don't quite have an identity yet, so the Seahawks are up there too. Also, I know we recommended Stroud and Tank Dell and talked about them in the Houston offense not looking quite as bad as we thought they would, but not as bad as they thought we would isn't the same as outside of the bottom 10 defenses, if that
Right.
point makes any sense at all. The Jags 17% are home against Houston. All
Missed
home teams
4
again.
starting offensive linemen last week against the Ravens, and I don't think that changes. Maybe Laramie Tunsil is back for the Texans, but 4 offensive linemen is really tough to overcome.
Yep, I'm right there with you here. So yeah, that's what we had for streamers here. Although again, I didn't see any huge red flags with matchups, so you probably don't have to stream exactly. But let's get to questions here and recap our Jerome Ford, Kyren Williams situation one last time at the end.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on questions, but we had a few good ones. So this one, Ryan asks, I have Jalen Hurts and DeAndre Hopkins. He's considering trading them for Justin Herbert and Mark Andrews. The reason he would do that, trade Hopkins, is that he also has Debo and Mike Evans. I think I would take the Herbert and Mark Andrews side in that equation.
I need a little context on your tight end situation, but for a lot of people, Mark Andrews solves that tight end situation.
Yeah.
And not having to worry about a carousel of tight ends might be worth it. Just enough here. I'm not exactly worried about Jalen Hurts. He hasn't lit the world up, but it's not like he's been particularly poor either. So, and he's still going to continue to get those red zone 6-pointers. So, it's not super far apart for me, but I'm fine doing that just to solidify tight end.
So this is one of those Dwight Schrute, we're going to trade up things, but reverse. So would you trade CeeDee Lamb off his big game, obviously in the win over the Jets, and Darren Waller for Kyren Williams, Alvin Kamara, Zack Moss, and Mark Andrews?
Ooh, again, this solves the tight end situation, so that's big. But it feels like you're putting together a lot of other unknown scraps on top of that for a clear wide receiver one. And my gut is whenever it's close, I take the side with the best player, and the best player is CeeDee Lamb by a mile.
Yeah, I lean towards your direction as well, too, with CeeDee Lamb, although there might be
I think
possible-
Waller is going to be serviceable. I'm not quite sure
Yeah.
that it's going to be too far of a downgrade from Waller or from Andrews to Waller.
I had answered this question a little bit earlier, Jake, but I guess I'm curious. So this is not PPR. Of the 3 guys rest of the season, who do you want? Drake London, Nico Collins, or Jacoby Myers? Again, not PPR.
Non-PPR.
Yes.
Okay, because I was going to say Nico Collins immediately. Non-PPR makes it a little bit closer, but I still think Nico Collins.
I think so, Nico Collins, too. I mentioned just also pick up Drake London, and you could drop somebody else instead, and I think that's what the user chose to do. But Nico Collins is going to be one of those guys that maybe you can get cheap this week, and that's it. Like, I don't think there's any more points where you're going to be able to get Nico Collins cheap. So
yeah, I was talking to my buddy about like guys that have been around the league for a while and kind of had a later career breakout. It's not super common, but like happened to Tyler Lockett, kind of, I guess you could say. We might see something similar with Nico Collins here.
Real quick, I guess somebody asked your thoughts on when the leash comes off for Breece Hall. I actually would have thought following week 1 when he looked really good, had those long runs against the Bills in that upset win, that Breece Hall would be more involved, and then just nothing at all. I think the Jets kind of recognized pretty quickly into that game against the Cowboys, we have no shot. And you would have a better shot if you used Breece Hall, so it's counterintuitive. But they might have just wanted to be like, all right, let's just play it safe in games that we have a better opportunity.
He looked like a must-start every week 1, and then week 2, granted, he plays one of the better real-life and fantasy defenses in the league. He was still only out there for a third of the team's snaps overall, which wasn't that much less than Dalvin Cook, and neither of them were particularly productive in any sense of the way.
Real quick before we put a bow on the Jerome Ford and Kyren Williams discussion, do you keep Saquon Barkley, knowing at minimum he's missing 3 games according to the Giants, or take James Conner, who's been offered to them? So James Conner's been very productive for the Cardinals. He is healthy right now, and you're assuming that Barkley is going to miss at close to a month at minimum.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd throw 80% of your budget on Ford or Kyren Williams, and then if that doesn't work, you can think about it, but it depends how desperate you are. If everything's even and you have a somewhat serviceable starter, I still probably hang on to Barkley because Conner's on a team that's just as terrible, if not worse. And
Conner's an injury risk in the same vein that Saquon Barkley is. Like, you might have plugged that hole for 1 game, and then that happens as well. I have been staying away from James Conner. Obviously, it's bit me in the butt for the past 2 weeks. It will even out. I mean, that's just the course of James Conner's career. Is it will even out for fantasy managers. All right, we had a few people ask, like, hey, Kyren Williams or Jerome Ford, waiver wire. We have said we'll pick up Kyren Williams because we know he has a starting role.
Yep.
We don't know for certain Jerome Ford does. However, we both believe he should and that he will. Mm-hmm. So it's not a situation of I want Kyren over Jerome Ford. It might be I want both of those running backs.
Yes, exactly. And to reiterate, a lot of it is if they were going to sign Kareem Hunt, why hasn't it happened yet? And 2, I don't think that there's actually as much interest out there in Cam Akers as the Rams would like people to believe. So there's a slight chance that they don't add the depth that everyone assumes that they're going to. And I think that risk enough is to, like we said, a minimum, keep him honest, don't need him bid is 35% of your FAAB, just to see if you can catch any other owners sleeping. If you're a Barkley or a Chubb owner, that probably has to go up to 60%. And there will definitely be some leagues out there where he goes for 80% or greater, no doubt in my mind. And it's still Williams over Ford. And you throw I'll just run this back again because you need short-term starters here, right? No matter what. So you throw far lower backup bids on guys like Matt Breida, Tony Jones, Craig Reynolds, guys that have better opportunity for 1 week, 1 to 3 weeks, I would say.
It goes Tony Jones, Breida, then Craig Reynolds for me again. Saints facing the Packers. Let's just assume Jamal and the Kendra Miller are out. Then I want Tony Jones in a better matchup than Matt Breida on Thursday night against the 49ers. That's where I am ranking those. And you'll have a bit of an update as of Thursday as to what's happening with the Saints backfield. So you could possibly have to make the decision day of Breida Thursday or Tony Jones. You should know by Thursday what's happening with the Saints.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good way to sum it up, how to handle it this week.
Yeah, I mean, we covered a lot. Obviously, the Jerome Ford news was big, certainly was big last night as well, too, for the Browns. As a person who enjoys watching football and watching Nick Chubb play, I want him to get better. I would love to not have to hop onto these podcasts every Tuesday and talk about this game-breaking injury that occurred Monday night. Not sure that's going to happen, though, because we got another two for slate of Monday night games next week. 2 more chances, I guess, or 1 more chance for more crippling injuries to occur. Let's just hope for some better days ahead from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, thoughts out to Nick Chubb, man. I really hope that he can somehow come through. But this is will he walk normal again injury, not when will he come back to be playing football. That was it was gruesome, almost Wilson McGahee-like. So, and as someone who I have very much enjoyed watch play over the years, a bright spot on this Browns team. We wish the guy the best here, but of course, unfortunately, our job is to talk about the fallout of these situations sometimes, and hopefully we set you guys up all right to do that today.
Yeah, we end on a somber note, but certainly wishing the best for Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb out there for certain. So, all right, that is for us. We'll be back in next Tuesday talking more waiver wire pickups. Best of luck for your lineups.